This podcast is a frank discussion on sexual assault. If you are in the USA, for free and confidential help, call 1-800-865-HOPE. In Australia, for confidential counseling and support in cases of sexual assault or abuse, please call 1-800-RESPECT. My little brother, Brady Hiete, was due to speak to me to unpack my story of surviving sexual assault. Throughout the course of our conversation, though, it became clear that many people have their own secrets of personal trauma. In a clear case of recognizing the power of revelation, listen to the interviewer become the interviewee in this unique one-on-one between brother and sister. Where does this podcast find you? Where are you in the world, little brother?
Yeah, so I am about an hour from where we grew up, live in Camarillo, California, and just so excited to be here. I feel like we are next door doing this thing, even though we're an ocean apart here.
It does feel like you're next door.
Yeah.
And question, how are you feeling today, Brady?
Yeah, so I got up today, got a little haircut, just felt like honestly one of the more important days of my life today. Makes me a little emotional thinking about that, but
that's why I brought the Kleenex today.
Yeah, just it's just been such a journey for you and obviously for your family, me as well. And I'm just feeling on top of the world that you're going to attack this thing and have such a sweet platform for so many people that you're going to be able to help, and just so excited today.
Me too.
For all your future listeners and followers, I was thinking about the name of your podcast, and I'm a tennis coach, 25 years in. And it's such a nice nod. I love the title of this podcast, Open Stance. I coach an open stance forehand, which to me is the modern game, right? It's you're trying to do it the way the pros do it if you're in an open stance when you're standing on the tennis court. And it's just such a nice parallel because I feel like you are, in a way, going to be bringing people, specifically women, into just a new modern way of tackling such a brutal experience.
I like that we've touched on that right away. Open stance is everything. Getting the name and delivering meaning through a couple words is a really gigantic task. So we've got the name Open Stance, and I have a symbol with the lion that I've been using as a logo. And one of the things that you touched on is how it's such a powerful thing for women in today's world and the new frontiers that we're breaking into. But one of the reasons that I use the lion specifically, so going to statistics, 1 in 4 women will be sexually assaulted or abused before the time that they're 18 years old. However, 1 in 6 boys will be sexually assaulted in their lifetime. So when I chose the lion to go with Open Stance, I was extremely clear that my logo didn't represent just one gender, because as we'll talk about in this journey, 30 years later now, there's nothing more clear than the fact that this Open Stance podcast is for everyone. Sexual assault, rape, and abuse does not discriminate. It's men, women, and children, sadly. So Open Stance, what you're talking about, it's amazing to hear your perspective, and a little bit to go with that is the form of the lion, which is non-gender specific. It's an insane honor to have you here. There's a lot of power in the fact that not only has a 30-year journey, I've arrived at this place right now in a position to be able to offer something that can be a resource for people around the world that are either survivors of sexual assault. It's a massive platform for education and information. So in terms of prevention, awareness, education, so that this doesn't happen to other people. You've been with me along this journey for many, many years. Why don't we start with the moment I told you this happened to me, and
Sure.
that we can just kick it off there. If you
Yeah,
remember
so,
where we were.
Yeah, I know exactly where we were. Just kind of honestly one of those days, like if you told me, hey, where were you when Kobe Bryant died? Not to say there was a death here, but this was a day. And you took me out to lunch. We went to El Tarasco, our favorite Mexican food down there in Venice, California. Which wasn't out of the blue. We do lunch a lot. You were now home from college for a couple years. And we went and, had a good start to the lunch because we just love that food. And you just stopped and you said, I have to tell you something. And that was a tough one. I remember just kind of stopping and catching my breath. And, you, which is so good for your listeners, you obviously took time for yourself to be able to get to that point, to be able to tell me, to tell the rest of the family. And so I don't even remember you getting that choked up. It was just such a strong position you had gotten to. You just were not going to let this thing get the better of you anymore. And I remember thinking to myself after, we had headed home, and I was just like, geez, that could have been like the most emotional conversation of my life, but you're just so strong that it really was more of just a conversation. You explained, who it was, exactly how it happened, how long you'd just been stuffing it down, but you just blossomed that day. And I know you'd already told, I think, our parents and one of our siblings before you told me, but I think you must have just been getting better and better every time it came out of your mouth, because it was such a show of strength. And as hard as the message was that you gave to me, I was like, dude, she's just going to get better from this, as a person, and your life was going to obviously take a huge turn for the better. But yeah, that was one of the days of my life that I'll just never forget. We were sitting on the brick patio table closest to the sidewalk, and I don't know if I had another bite of food that day.
No, it's what you said is such a huge part of why we're sitting here today. Carrying around a deadly secret like that, it's deadly to the soul. And I carried the secret around, buried, locked away for 7 years from the time I was raped in college, 17 years old. So by the time it took that long for me to get this to the surface, and something happened in life. I had a relationship breakup that triggered a reaction this strong, and I found myself in counseling. But that first step to just say the words and to hear myself say what happened out loud for the very first time, is probably the most powerful thing an individual can do in the recovery and healing process. Without that, you don't have much of a chance. So the strength that you are talking about, I had a lot more to go from there, but that first time I was able to say it out loud and then to tell my family, yes, there was an incredible fire that I didn't know was happening, and it did snowball from there. And one of the things we were chatting about earlier before we got started were these 5 journals sitting behind me. That's journaling that I did since 1993 when I left college. And in those journals, when I go back and reread them, I was screaming in the pages about this rape and what it has. I didn't even know what it meant, but it was somewhere in my unconscious, and it was screaming through the pages, and I was working through it, not knowing. And then finally, in about 1998, it all came to the surface, and that's when I ended up in counseling and able to tell you. But the fact that talking to you, you actually were the first one I was going to tell, and I think it was just a scheduling conflict, to be honest. But
these damn schedules.
The damn schedules, that's right. And the support that came was mind-blowing. I didn't know what was going to happen when I told you. That's why I told all of you individually. And in my family, as we know, we've got 5 of us, 5 kids and 2 parents, and that's a lot of people to tell. But I thought breaking it down one by one, not knowing the response and how heavy it would be. And but every single one of you just delivered on support. And that was the stepping stone to everything I have done since. And I didn't know that was going to happen. It doesn't always happen. So just a quick moment to say thank you for that, because without that kind of unconditional support, understanding, and compassion, I would have just easily shut it down again and probably been living with it buried deep down for the rest of my life. So you're welcome. Of course, I know so much more about rape now after your awful experience, and it just still blows my mind the guilt that women, and obviously men, as you're saying, 1 in 6, the guilt, did I do something wrong here? As somebody who hasn't been through that, it just still blows me away that is a common feeling for victims. And I can't imagine you ever telling me something like that, or anybody for that matter, not getting just this overwhelming support. You guys have to have that. And it's such a big part of why we're the power in sitting here. Number one is the ability to use my voice right now to talk with you about this in a platform where people around the world can tune in and listen. That to me is a huge motivation for what I'm doing to help people that don't go through sexual assault or don't know someone that has been through it. God forbid it ever happens to someone, but it's mind-blowing what a victim does go through. The rape and the assault is one thing, but the re-victimization that continues in many times for the rest of your life. You're abused emotionally over and over and over. And in many cases, there are other girls and boys sitting out there that have told their families about an assault that they've had or they've been victim to, and they've been denied that. They haven't been believed. They have been told the questions are the burning questions that will silence you again. So what were you wearing that night? Why were you there? You were asking for it. The questions are endless. Those kind of questions could have come back to me from my family. They could have come back from you. You're my brother, and there's nobody I love on the planet more. So you can imagine the magnitude of a person sitting there with a loved one that doesn't believe them, doesn't hear them, that puts the blame on them. So the shame and the guilt, it's a mountain that comes on you instantly. And so many people walk around this planet in that circumstance. So again, having you with me today is a representation, not only for my life, which made this possible. Nothing's possible unless I did the work in my own world, in my own heart. But it's a representation of what can happen when you're aware of this stuff. If you ask the questions, if you haven't been a survivor and you are a family member of a survivor, how should you respond? There's a whole education in that, which nobody knows. Like for you, what did you know how to say to me when I told you this?
you know, that initial reaction is obviously just 100% organic. You just want to give the biggest hug, just make you feel protected, number one, that you're safe. But you know, you touched on just the secrecy, right? I don't know if it's just we were raised a little bit old school, but you know, I think we specifically was like, hey, you don't tell people your stuff. Keep it to yourself. And how we were raised to get, you know, there's a difference to me between being private and having secrets, right? You came into my, you know, we love candy, right? So you came into my room one time and you found a brown paper bag thinking, oh, I found Brady's candy stash. And it was, you know, needles of, you know, and testosterone that I take, right? Because, you know, I had this massive secret that, you know, I couldn't have kids. And, you know, so for me, not being a victim of anything more than just holding on to this massive secret for a long time in my life, you being able to speak out, talk about something so deep and dark that nobody had heard about, you know, I've gotten so much better. I have, you know, 2 daughters and 9 and 11 years old, and took one of them on a road trip in November and had this awesome conversation about how dad couldn't have kids. And, you know, mom and I have been on this awesome journey that we were able to get help from doctors. And here I am with the 2 best girls I can think of, you know. And so his secrets are just debilitating. You know, you hold on to something like that and it'll just eat you alive. This secret of mine was eating me alive for a long time, you know. And
which one, Brady? The first one where you couldn't tell, or the family didn't know, or the?
Yeah, it's just as a man, you know, it just does not seem common that hey, you're not going to be able to have kids. Like, it always seemed like, hey, girls hear that, totally okay, adopt, do whatever. It's not a huge percentage of men that that can't father kids. And so I was in this one person fraternity, it seemed like, for a long time. So going through college, dating girls, you know, getting to the point where, hey, would I marry that girl? Okay, at some point you have to tell them. And, you know, I went almost 10 years without ever telling any girlfriend that I couldn't have kids. I didn't know, is that going to be a deal breaker? You know, will they not want me? Am I tainted goods in some way? And, you know, like you were saying, the more it comes out, especially to people you love, you talk to, you know, your wife, you talk to your daughters, you talk to close friends who see your girls, and I'm 6'7", and it's like, hey, how come your daughters are so short? Well, because, you know, I had to get some help having kids. Yeah. And the more you say it, the more natural it is. And you're not keeping secrets anymore. You know, and on the privacy side, you know, do I walk down the street saying, hey, I can't have kids? Of course not. You know, I love this feeling that, you know, those who need to be told are for sure going to be told. But you still, in a way, can have privacy, you know, and I think that's important probably for a lot of your listeners and viewers, is just to know, you know, you don't have to just go shout to the world, but just starting to unload it and get it off your chest to people that matter is just so key.
This is what we've just talked about in your personal story in relation to secrets is poetic justice. And it's mind-blowing. You and I have talked about this podcast. We knew we weren't going to have any real structure to it for this exact reason, because you can't you cannot structure this kind of conversation. And I have a notebook here that,
Very dad of you.
yeah,
Very dad of you right there.
it's all about hiding the secret. And
Yeah.
the biggest, most compelling, powerful thing in all of this as a survivor from my world, and now listening to how you relate this to life in general, and it doesn't have to be rape or sexual assault. It applies to every huge,
Yeah.
deep, dark secret people carry around. The secret is the silent killer. And this is where I've done a lot of research and scientific literature will show you very clearly that keeping a secret is quite poisonous and will manifest in health issues and all kinds of problems. And that is the silent killer. So when I think about where does this podcast go, what are we doing? And you have just absolutely validated probably the most core thing that I can provide is it is about breaking the silence. And there's nothing more than that first massive, brave, courageous, scary step than when you break the silence. And only the individual can do that. It's your secret.
Right.
You've just told me something that you've given me more I didn't realize. I actually knew when you took your daughter Mason on that trip. I didn't know because you didn't tell me, but I knew. It's so funny. I just heard it for the first time now. But
yeah. I mean,
what did that feel like when you told your
it's
daughter?
it's interesting. So Lauren and I have always, me specifically, since they were 3, 4 years old, have always just laced conversations with, hey, you might not ever get as tall as dad, or we had some help. And the tricky thing for me was, hey, I don't want to have the sex talk with my daughter at age 4, right? But you got to start letting them know, because kids are so aware, they pick up on everything. And so I was getting practice of talking to them about it. We're in a community now. We've got a lot of close friends here. We weren't going to keep them in the dark. It's just not anything to keep to ourselves. If you value the people around you, let them in on stuff that's really core to you, right? So Mason's 11 now, and for her birthday, and I've always wanted to take the girls on road trips one-on-one and just have that dad-daughter time. But yeah, specifically, I knew, 4-hour car ride. Hey, God, it's time. She's gonna be having health class coming up. She's gonna know exactly what's going on. You asked for a response that you would just beg for. It was like, oh, that's cool, Dad. Like, hey, and she said, what about Taylor? Is Taylor the same? She was kind of almost like, hey, was it just me? And I go, no, we had you guys the exact same way. And, I'm their dad. It's just the coolest thing. And you have it built up in your head sometimes that these conversations are going to be difficult. And you roll it out, and all of a sudden, the way you felt like you got a response from your family, couldn't be better. It was like a freaking blanket gets thrown around you when somebody responds with just love.
Would you say that by your experience with me and having confided in you a very dark secret, does that carry any weight to giving you strength and you having courage later on with bringing up tough issues or secrets in terms of people tuning in and listening? The fact that I'll just quickly wrap it up to give you this question, but by staying silent, not only is it extremely poisonous and dangerous for the individual on a number of levels, mentally and physically and spiritually. If I had remained silent my whole life, how many people have I not been able to save or help or protect from information, experience, education that I have? I have power in the experience that happened to me. And if I don't use my voice and I do not put out there what I've learned and what I've gained from all of this in a positive way, how many people potentially will be harmed in the future? And so going back to you, not only are you're bringing this secret up to the surface for yourself and your own health, what about for other people, your daughters, your family, and those closest to you, as an example of what they may need to do at some stage in their life?
Yeah, I mean, look, I in no way blame our parents for the fact that you and I, and maybe our, I don't know, maybe our siblings held on to stuff without even talking to those closest to us for way too long. I just think that was how a lot of people operated. So it would be such a disservice now with my girls, and you know, we've got a big family. We have a lot of nieces and nephews that they need to see you. They have to know, I mean, you're a professional speaker on something that is so valuable, especially the math that 1 in 4 girls is going to have a sexual assault. Hard to even put faces to that, but it's going to happen. They need you. They need me. They have to know that communication is, like you said, it's the most important thing to having a life through horrific stuff. And look, my experience, while it's just nowhere near what you went through, but you know, it was something that for me personally was just devastating, right? I'm a lover of kids, and it really felt like a part of me was just shattered, right? And while they're not the same, you know, if you're not speaking out, if I'm not showing them through action how to talk about stuff that's difficult in our lives, you know, it's just going to be a trend where how we were raised continues on. So, you know, you're going to be the champion for our family, and hopefully a lot more girls and boys out there to live flourishing lives.
What you said really resonated with me. Number one, just to every person's trauma. What we're talking about here at Open Stance is sexual assault, rape, abuse, trauma. But what you and I are talking about is trauma. And it's just, your trauma is no less or no more. We all have, in many cases, a trauma in our lives. And you just said words like shattered, devastated. Because you're my brother, and I feel like we were born in the same pod. We've got a lot of similar DNA. I feel that your experience, what you've been through, your trauma, is as devastating on as many levels or more as mine. So that's a big one. Never to compare traumas. That's just setting that record straight.
Right.
And number two, the education. So Open Stance, yes, I am a survivor of sexual assault. I was drugged and rendered unconscious for 10 hours and abused and raped. That is something that I was not prepared for. And let me tell you why. I don't think at 17 years old, when I was playing tennis at Duke University, that I really even knew what sexual assault or rape was, to be
Yeah.
blatantly honest. If you had said the word, I probably read it in terms of a book, say, you know, whatever. I had no comprehension. So when this happened to me, I woke up on a floor completely violated, and I didn't even know myself or my body in that moment. It was completely otherworldly. Education. I have, all of my heart goes into Open Stance to provide people with a chance. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what rape or assault was. God forbid, I had no idea what drug facilitated rape was. Somebody put something in my drink and knocked me unconscious. That I had never heard of. At the time, when I was 17, we had no phones. There was no internet, going back a little bit. Regardless, there would have been somebody on campus, and I know from further research, there were people on the Duke University campus I could have gone to. I could have gone to the police. That would have been the obvious thing. But I was in a state of shock, which I didn't know at the time. And the education you need to have in your computer, up in your brain, if this happens to you or somebody you know, or you're watching it happen, or you hear about it happen, you need to have some kind of plan. I had no plan.
Right.
So what we're talking about, your daughters, Brady, our nieces, our nephews, we're surrounded by families raising children. We're surrounded by survivors, and you don't even know it. We need education. I needed to know what to do. I needed to know, even though I didn't have a phone, I couldn't call somebody. I didn't have a car where I was. I actually had to have my rapist drive me back to the campus because I had no money. I had no credit card. I couldn't call a cab. I had no Uber. We had none of that back then. I was stuck in my predator's apartment, and I had to get a ride home with him. If I had known anything, I would have at least arrived into my dorm room and told my roommate, told somebody, told the police, anybody, but I didn't know what to do. So when we're talking about young children, I have 3 young children, a 10-year-old boy, a 9-year-old boy, and a 7-year-old daughter. You have 2 young girls. Our brothers and sisters have kids. When does the education start? It can start at their age. You don't have, we're not talking the big picture, but there are unbelievable building blocks available to us in today's world that will graduate young children year by year according to their age and their ability to understand. These organizations around the country, around the world, are doing phenomenal work on a prevention and awareness and education level. And again, it's all about not holding the secret or thinking your kid has to be in 10th grade before you can have a serious chat with him. So thank you for bringing that up about how you felt comfortable on that 4-hour ride with your daughter Mason, and saying, what are we waiting for? You know how to talk to your daughter. You know at what level she is. And then again, going back to the response, if you've got something like this happening and you've got a trauma, sexual assault, in my experience, I didn't tell one person. How is that possible? And then to live with it. So go ahead.
You'd like to think that, oh, so long ago, early 90s. I'm just taking a wild guess that there's still huge numbers of people in 2021 that are still operating that same way, even with a phone, with the internet, with everything. Just afraid to probably step through that door of talking about it.
Absolutely.
So this is just such an awesome thing you're doing, dude.
Every year, I've been affiliated with the Rape Treatment Center in Santa Monica, California. It's part of the UCLA Medical Center. in Santa Monica. It's a phenomenal organization that I received counseling from. When I finally ended up getting the secret out and breaking my own silence, I saw an Oprah Winfrey show that week, and Oprah Winfrey was interviewing David Schwimmer and Gail Abarbanel, who is the director founder of the Rape Treatment Center.
Mm-hmm.
And David and Gail were actually talking about the work that they do at this organization. David's been on the executive board for over 2 decades now. And the specific story they were talking about was drug facilitated rape. It was an awareness around the problem, because this is something that just started running rampant when I was in college between 1989 and 1993.
Mm-hmm.
When I eventually went back to the North Carolina Police Department to report this rape, to report my rape, the detective on my case said, these are the years this drug just literally came into the country and was running absolutely rampant, uncontrolled on college campuses. So going back to the Oprah Winfrey show, this was a massive news and education piece, because the rape drugs and the roofies and all these things that were being used completely uncontrolled were wreaking havoc in across the country. So, but it was that exact story that got me to the Rape Treatment Center. I saw David Schwimmer, a male, addressing the situation, and I thought, well, that was powerful. Oprah Winfrey. And then our dad, Kurt, called up this center because it happened to be in our hometown. And I ended up at this center. But after counseling for about 1.5 years, 2 years, I ended up to go on and do quite a bit of speaking for this organization. And again, the reason I go back to and pulling it all together, the Rape Treatment Center every year has the annual brunch, which you've been to. It's where they raise all their funds so that they are afforded the opportunity to provide free counseling, free legal services, free everything for victims of rape and abuse, children and women. But what I see is the fact that even with today's technology, victims stand up and speak at this brunch every year in October. And up to this year, we have all the technology, all the information, the most updated platforms. And like you said, it's still nearly impossible for so many people to talk about or tell about what's happened to them. So it's interesting that you pointed that out, because I think about it all the time. I was just sitting there completely alone, having no clue what to do. But fast forward to 2021, this happening to another young girl in university, for example. Today, she could have her phone sitting right there and still not call somebody. So it's, again, the message is incredibly powerful to teach the children, teach people from a very, very early age, and get them used to knowing that when big things happen in your life, it doesn't necessarily have to be a trauma we're talking about. Our children need to know they can come to us with anything, never mind something as significant as what you've gone through in your life and what I've gone through. It's that to be healthy and to look after yourself, it's critical that we learn to talk about the tough stuff, to have the hard conversations. They're not easy. They never will be easy. But they have to happen, and we have to learn how to do that and who to have them with.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty brutal that the genesis of this podcast is such a vicious assault, but I mean, this is just, like I said, it's going to be so awesome. I think you're going to affect so many lives with this Open Stance podcast, and you'll be my first podcast that I start to listen to on the regular.
That's awesome.
I can't wait. I'm sure you're going to have so many powerful guests, all with unique stories. that likely found their voice, hopefully sooner than later. But it's just awesome work you're doing, dude.
Thanks, Brad. It is really heavy, and I think we've covered a lot today. One thing I will add to what you've just said before we close out is it's so important. I've found it's a huge belief that I have is you have to know and learn and be able to stand up for yourself in your life. I've learned a lot in the last 30 years on the back of this trauma. But learning how to stand up for yourself is absolutely critical, because if we don't know how to do that for ourselves, we cannot do it for anyone else.
Right.
And I'm sitting here on the Open Stance podcast platform, reaching out to the planet, but on a much more nuclear level, like you and I, our brothers, our sisters, our friends, with the children in our lives, other people with nieces and nephews, or the loved ones in people's lives. There's a responsibility for us to stand up for ourselves, and responsibility to act, and to know that we control our reactions to things. You and I, we both have traumas in our life. We've just been able to share very, very private information, which is on a global platform. How amazing that we can do that. It just goes to show where we are.
Yeah.
And it also highlights the core again of where this all comes from for me is I've had to learn how to stand up for myself in this process. That was number one. Then there's a responsibility that comes with that. I've been given a great trauma in my life. Now, it controlled me for a lot of years. And then that shifted, and I've been one of the fortunate people to be able to get to a place in my life that I learned through extremely hard work and a lot of hard years that it doesn't control me. My mind controls it. So I learned it's my reaction. Mm-hmm. When it comes down to the basic building blocks of where I am and you are, we've changed our reaction to something. And now it's our responsibility. All right. Do we just sit with that and be okay for ourselves? No. There's a greater responsibility that you and I both have, and that people all over the world that have come to this place is, it's not easy, but to share it so that other people have that chance. They're working through it in their own lives. This could be the resource, the tool, the conversation. There could be one word in all of this that helps trigger an individual on this planet to get to that next level where they own their conversation in life. They own their life. And then you're in a position like you and I. It's amazing to hear you and how you're raising your girls, and you own it, bud. And you're going to be able to, you walk the walk, you're a leader, you've done it. So you can now teach them because you're a living example of it. And that's really what this boils down to, is this doesn't happen, you and I, without having been through it. Sometimes you say you walk through the fire.
Yeah.
But you know what? Sometimes you got to walk through the fire, because the other side is this.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little cliche, but look, if one person listens to you and picks up a phone and makes a call and goes to get help for themselves, I mean, it's totally worth it. All of this is totally worth it for one person, you know?
It was actually the one person that it was totally worth it for today was me. I learned a lot about you today, and that made me a better person today. It's incredible what a conversation and saying stuff out loud can do.
Big time.
It can be so simple and yet so impactful.
Yeah.
Well, Brady, youngest brother, you and I are the first of 5 and the last of 5, but I do tell people when they ask about you, I always say Brady and I, he's the youngest, I'm the oldest, separated by 6 years, but I believe we came out of the same pod somehow. So
Yeah.
we're as close as it gets. And it's been an honor to have you here. And I wouldn't have been here without you. I love you.
Thanks. Love you.
All right. I think that's a wrap for episode 1 of Open Stance.
Sky's the limit.
Love you, Brady.
Okay. Love you, Trace. Great talk.
Awesome. Talk soon.
You got it.
Bye, bud.